Microsoft details the future of Windows, Surface, and a little bit of Xbox as well. Happy Friday, my friends. It is Friday. It's been a busy week. It's a busy week in the world of Microsoft. They held their developer conference called Build this week, and there was just a ton of news drop because not only did they have Build, they had a quasi Windows AI Surface event, but it was really just kind of part of Build and lean into Build. So it was just a really busy week, and there is much to talk about. So hopefully you had a wonderful week. Let's dive into the details. And the first details are pretty saucy, and you probably already know much of the finer points, but there's things worth pointing out about these two new Surface devices. So we have two new Surface ARM devices, which is worth pointing out: the Surface Pro and the Surface Laptop. And I'm intentionally not saying the edition number because these things do not have a version number. It's not Surface Pro 7, it's not Surface Pro 11 or Surface Laptop 7. They are dropping that name. We'll get into that detail here in a second. But yes, they do, especially the laptop, they look Mac-like. But you know what? Like any laptop that is just a keyboard, screen, and trackpad and is thin is of course gonna look like a Mac. And you can ride Microsoft for that, or you can just say, look, that's just kind of what it is. And I don't really care. It's a laptop. It's a laptop. And I think these things look good. Like, personally speaking, I think they look fantastic. I am optimistic about ARM. The Surface Pro specs look super interesting, although notably, it's worth pointing out they do get expensive, especially on the Surface Pro side. If you put an OLED display in there and really jack up everything you need to pay for, you will surpass $2,000 for this thing. So, price point and value, that is a different conversation. Than I think they look good. I am optimistic that this might finally, and fingers crossed, I think we've been saying this since 2012. This might be the time that ARM really does actually start to chip away, and it's going to be slow. If people are thinking oh God, this time next year, there's going to be 200 million Windows ARM, I would lower those expectations quite a bit. I think it's going to be slow and methodical in a march, and it's just going to take time. But you got to start somewhere, and the fact that Microsoft is seemingly launching two products, their top selling products, by the way, the Pro and the laptop, with ARM chips. You also saw a smattering of vendors like Dell and Asus and all those guys were dropping stuff. Samsung has a device that if you buy it, you get a free TV, which is an absurd statement within itself. But this stuff is looking good. However, the naming here is worth noting because it's Surface Pro 11th edition, Surface Laptop 7th edition. For those of you who are Surface fans and who've been paying attention since the very beginning, Microsoft has tried this before. It was the Surface Pro, what we now know as the Surface Pro 5. When the Surface Pro 5 was launched, it was just the Surface Pro 5, I think, 2017. And it turned into being a nightmare for Microsoft from a support perspective, and retroactively, they named it Surface Pro 5. When the Surface Pro 6 was released, they quietly went back and said, you've got a Surface Pro 5. And yet here they are again, dropping that the numeral from the name, although you can argue the 11th edition and 7th edition is their take of trying to do this. Either way, this is remember, there's new leadership, and sometimes you forget your past and history. I'm not saying they're going to have the same support issues again. However, it's a thing. So, moving on, that's not the only hardware that was announced. This is where I start to say it gets kind of expensive. So there's this new Surface Pro Flex keyboard, and if you get the Flex keyboard with the slim pen, if you're new to the ecosystem and you need both of these things, now it's not a type cover, it's a Flex cover, which is a slightly different thing. However, that's $450 dues on top of whatever piece of hardware. Well, I guess you're buying the Surface Pro 11th edition, so $450 on top of that. Now, what is the Flex keyboard, you might say? Well, it's a keyboard that you can detach and continue to use, which I'm assuming is using Bluetooth at this point. It just becomes a Bluetooth detached keyboard, which I'm not against. I think that's actually smart, that if you find it awkward and you want to detach the keyboard and keep on typing, you can do that. Now, I will point out that this is not the first time that Microsoft has done this. Again, for people who pay attention to the Surface world, many, many moons ago, it might have been the Surface Pro 2. It might have been the 2. I looked for a picture, but I didn't find one. I'm sure somebody has one. They had this barrel attachment that you could put on the type covers, I think any type cover at the time, and it had batteries in it and Bluetooth connectivity, and you could use this thing wirelessly. And now they've just built it all in. I don't know if that Bluetooth attachment ever got sold. They definitely announced it, and you could buy it at the Microsoft store on Redmond campus, like employees could, but I can't remember if it ever actually made its way to retail at the end of it. But either way, 41 hours of battery life and recharges when attached. But that $450 is expensive. However, I will tell you, potentially the most interesting piece of hardware that was announced is actually this thing, the dev kit, the Snapdragon Dev Box. Actually looks like a pretty darn good value. Okay, so what is this thing? Unfortunately, this isn't like a retail box. If you're a developer, you should be able to get your hands on this thing. However, it is a Snapdragon X Elite chip, 32 gigs of DDR5 RAM, 512 gigs of storage, 3 USB Type-C ports, and 2 USB-A, an Ethernet port, and 1 HDMI port. And this is $899. This is... Folks, you're looking at a Mac Mini is what you're looking at, but a PC. Especially since Intel gave up on NUC. The NUC things are gone. Like, this thing looks like spray paint it silver and slap an HP logo on it and sell this thing. I think it would actually sell pretty darn well. I guess it really depends on the performance of it. And I hope there's some margin built in there for Snapdragon or Qualcomm so that HP could do this, or a Dell or an Acer. But like, this thing looks great on paper, because here's here's a real genuine challenge for everybody listening to this who's like saying, I want to run Windows on ARM. If you're like saying that, here's something, and it feels wrong to say this, but you hear me out. If you're looking for just to get up and running, there's great deals on like Mac Minis, and anything that's running an M1 chip and beyond can run Parallels and can run Windows on ARM, and you get the Windows on ARM experience, and you get good performance on that Mac chip. So when you look at these things, especially like the new stuff that was just announced, like the Pro 11th edition, and you drag that price point all the way up, you can go buy a MacBook and go run Windows on ARM and potentially have a better experience. It just kind of depends. I know it feels kind of icky to say that, but if you truly need to build Windows on ARM, like, go look at a Mac Mini, or like find a way to get one of these dev boxes, because this box right here, if you go spec out an M2 Mac Mini, which starts at the same price, this is on paper, this is better hardware. We don't know the true performance yet, right? We're still like, the benchmarks look good, right? But we're still in the real world. We need real world testing and everything else. And so this dev box looks great. Like, I think that might be, it's the most interesting thing, because we knew about the Surface stuff, but like, this dev box, good value, get your hands on ARM. I don't know. We'll see. But the real big like announcement from all of this week has really been this new class of PCs, these Copilot Plus PC. And yeah, by this point, you probably already know, but if just as a real quick refresher, this is a new class of PC with an NPU with 40 TOPS of NPU computer. What is that? Trillions operations per second on the NPU side. I believe they said they expect to have 50 million of these devices in market by the end of the year. However, I would qualify that by saying the IDC forecasts that there will be 292-ish million PCs sold this year. So, right, you can do the math there and realize, like, okay, this is still, even if they sold all of them and everybody's using them every day, it's still, it's not even close to half of the market that will be sold this year. So anyways, they're interesting things. They are interesting stuff, because this new class of Copilot Plus PCs has the NPUs and has new experiences that you can't get on a traditional PC. And if you could see me right now, I would say new experiences in quotes that you can't get on a traditional PC. Let's put it this way, that they have blocked from being on a traditional PC. Because if you're telling me that an NPU is doing things that a 4090 from NVIDIA can't, I don't quite know if I buy that narrative. I'm not saying the NPU isn't more efficient or more power sensitive to it, but let's be real. If you have a high-end GPU, you should be able to do recall. That being said, recall is a super interesting thing from like many different vantage points. One, the tool, obviously everybody's like, it's like Timeline. I think it uses some of the same API calls as Timeline. I could be wrong on that, but really what it's doing is just taking screenshots and then uses fancy OCR, some sort of AI flavor that looks at your screenshot, catalogs it and whatever, and keeps it. And so that when you go back searching, it can find it. It's another vector or medium to help improve search. However, like, why didn't they just improve search? Because they need it, probably because, again, nobody's going to be like, oh, search is better. I should go get a Copilot Plus PC because search will not be terrible. And it's like, why wouldn't you just fix search in Windows 11? Anybody who uses search knows that it's not great. You use a plugin like Everything, and it's fantastic. What really should be happening here, and maybe it is when they're just adding a fancy UI on it, although the screenshots don't seem very optimal or optimized for this experience, is like, why not just attach all that metadata to like your PowerPoint file and then it just surface the PowerPoint file? I don't know. Until we get like our truly deep dive into how this is working and like tearing it apart, recall is interesting. I don't know if it's for me. I don't know if it's for you. That's a real personal decision. And on the personal side and the privacy side, there's a genuine concern here, right? If it's taking a screenshot every couple seconds or something like that, it's going to capture things you don't want shared on the web. I mean, there's going to be a lot of images. Use your imagination on what type of images can be caught up in this thing. And Microsoft's suddenly going to have all this data. Now, they say it's on device, it's private, it won't be shared. That's great, right up until it isn't, right up until you get subpoenaed and you have to hand over your laptop and suddenly all this stuff is there. What about your passwords? Like, we need like real true transparency. Like, if you use, it supposedly respects Chrome incognito mode. Does it respect everybody's incognito mode? What if you type a password into like a browser? Like, these are all the sorts of things. What if one password is open, as an example, and you reveal a password? Like, are all these things vacuumed up into here? Some of it sounds like Microsoft is trying to do the right thing, but it's all good until the wrong thing accidentally happens or something like that. So we'll just keep your eye open for these Copilot Plus PCs and Recall, and you can opt out of Recall. That is very fair and valid, and it'll turn off. You need 50 gigs of storage plus these NPUs to make it happen. So not a ton of people are going to be running this on day one, unless someone figures out how to backport it to traditional peasant PCs as we are today. So it's interesting. It was interesting to see this Copilot Plus PC, which is a new category they're trying to define. Whether or not that lands with the consumer at all, and like what comes next, like Copilot squared PCs, like if it has 80 tops, we don't really know. But you know what? This is Microsoft's thing. I don't care for the name personally, because is it Copilot Plus space PC or is it Copilot Plus PC? Like, if you look, depending on the image you look at, especially if you're watching this on the video, it looks like all one word, but a lot of the marketing and actual write-ups show it as like Copilot Plus PC. This is Microsoft. This is old school Microsoft branding. At the end of the day, it is what it is, and here we go. The other thing that is like worth pointing out is, does anybody care? The NPU stuff, don't get me wrong, I use AI stuff all the time. I use some of the language model, the LLM studios. I like playing with this stuff. These large language models running locally is fascinating. I don't know if Recall is it. I don't know if all the features they showed off are really things. And the reason why I bring this up is not to be like, I'm dogging on Microsoft's new initiative. It's great. I'm happy they're embracing this. Obviously, they're going to be doing that. They're invested heavily into OpenAI. Here's the thing. Remember how we had all those Windows 12 rumors? So like looking at what has been announced now, you kind of see how this could have been quasi a Windows 12 thing. Like, hey, all this AI stuff, Recall and AI features beyond, like you need a Windows 12 PC to make that happen. Well, all they did was just swap out, instead of saying Windows 12 PC, you need a Copilot Plus PC to make that happen. And I will tell you from a marketing perspective, that is a much harder story to land. So I have to go to my mom and be like, hey, mom, no. You don't go get a Windows 12 PC and you'll get all this stuff. Like, that's easy. No, mom, you need to go get a Copilot Plus PC that runs Windows 11. And my mom would say, she won't actually say this, you have Windows 11 at home right now. Why do I need this? And like, right? I don't foresee Copilot Plus PC being things that drive people to buy this stuff. However, now don't confuse my enthusiasm here, because I do think ARM devices have the potential to solve that narrative. I think ARM devices have a lot of desire for people to go buy, because they hear about the Mac side and saying, gosh darn it, Brad, I want that on the PC side. And while, yeah, you've kind of had it until now, this looks like the first real respectable route that is going to be coming on this AI PC side. So, if I'm down on anything, it's like Copilot PC, but the ARM stuff, like the Windows on ARM, much more optimistic about that. So super, super interesting stuff. A lot of things, a lot of things going on right now. Also announced at Build, we got the .NET Preview 9.4 with a bunch of updates, not surprisingly, that involve AI. So if you're a .NET user or developer, I should say, .NET Preview 9 or Preview 4, .NET 9 Preview 4 is now available and worth taking a look at. And one of the things that is hilarious that got the biggest applause at Build, and I say that not really whatever, is that Teams will soon get custom reaction emojis. This is big on Slack and I believe Twitch as well. And so that will be coming to Teams. And there was a large amount of applause this week. And also on the backside of everything, Bing took a little bit of a bong, actually the past 24, 36-ish hours, where it went down and took Copilot with it, took Bing with it, took DuckDuckGo with it. And so, yeah. Yep. All right, let's jump over to the gaming news because there's absolutely gaming news this week. There's a lot going on. First off, Activision is running one of the gnarliest ad campaigns that I have seen in a while. So they're doing their whole Black Ops 6 stuff, and they have Mount Rushmore with blindfolds on and saying like the truth lies beneath or whatever, the truth lies and all this other stuff. And so you're thinking like, Brad, whatever. These are literally on the front page of USA Today and like the New York Post. Like they spent some serious dollars doing this to promote this game. And this is like, you know, I cautiously give them like a golf clap because, hey, this grabs attention. This is how you raise awareness. Now, it's a little bit easier to do for Call of Duty because they know how much they will actually sell when this game goes out the door, right? Like the risk of saying like, oh, we're going to spend a whole bunch of money on marketing and hopefully we make it all back. Like they know they're going to make it all back. Like that's a known quantity. And so this is like wildly effective and I think super well done and very kind of edgy, pushing the boundaries of what, you know, is acceptable, potentially to some people, because they might see blindfolds on Mount Rushmore and be like, that's sacrilegious, and then other people get offended or whatever. I think it's, you know, hats off for them taking a risk with this stuff. The other thing to be keep in mind here, what platforms is this Call of Duty Black Ops 6, which we will learn, what is it, June 9th after the gaming event for the Xbox. What platforms is it going to support? And you might be saying, what do you mean, Brett? Well, obviously we know it's going to support Xbox Series S and X. It's going to support PlayStation 5. Is it going to support PlayStation 4? Is it going to support Xbox, the last gen stuff? Now, we've learned recently that Sony says like if something like half of their user base is still on PlayStation or their monthly active users is still on 4, I would be shocked if this is like truly and only a next gen title. I really would be, because if you're cutting out that swath of the market, you're banking on that you're going to sell a whole bunch of consoles, or you're, in this case, your competitor is also going to sell a whole bunch of consoles. So like if Microsoft is truly like wanting to stick a knife into Sony and be like, we don't want you to sell any more consoles, or not help sell consoles, like they'll make it PlayStation 4 compatible. It's like an interesting, they're not, please don't run with that and says Microsoft's going to stick out to Sony by making it support PlayStation 4, which sounds counterintuitive, but I suspect it will support, what we now consider last gen. Now, the other one is Nintendo, right? Remember, Microsoft said, hey, if we land this deal, we'll support Nintendo. I would be flabbergasted if this Black Ops 6 actually supports Nintendo, right? It takes years and timelines to do that, unless they're going to like port over like Warzone Mobile to the Switch, which I guess is an option. Although I suspect maybe Microsoft is trying to line up with potentially that next gen Nintendo handheld and then go from there. So other things that have come out, actually, it was part of Build, I believe, and I think this is actually officially Microsoft sanctioned. Anyways, so Windows on ARM ready software, more specifically games, if you go to worksonwoa.com, has a list of a whole bunch of stuff. Let me just be real clear. If you want a game, if you're buying a gaming laptop, do not buy an ARM device. Maybe that might be true in like 5-6 years from now. I'll be like, just buy an ARM device. It's perfectly fine. But this is like, you're still, I don't want to say first gen because that's not true. And there's a lot of games that run great, but you know what? If you don't want to be worried about compatibility, and if you're trying to get best frame rate possible, you're not buying a Windows on ARM device. Like just please, just don't. So other things that happened this week, the big one on the game side is that Hellblade 2 has come out. It's shipped. I always say congrats on shipping. At least I try to when these things happen to the dev team, because hey, shipping is hard. I don't care what industry you're in or what product's going out the door. Shipping, coming up with an idea, incubating, maturing, polishing, and shipping a product is difficult, and they got it done. And so congrats on that side. The reception has been a bit mixed. Not mixed like Redfall mixed. I mean, they have an 81 Metacritic score. I believe internally Microsoft tries to target at 80 or better. So I think that this would be graded on the Metacritic score as meets expectation. I wouldn't say exceeds expectations, but at least meets expectations from a Metacritic score. I have no idea about sales. Microsoft hasn't given us any hints about that or number of players or what's happening with Game Pass. We know nothing about that. I have not played it yet. I think it kind of falls into it. People were like riding me on Twitter for this. Like this is very much a photographic, visual realistic storytelling, sort of puzzling game, right? It's not a game that gives you a dopamine hit every 15 seconds. People are like, well, it's a game, it should be fun. Like this is not a Call of Duty drop into like a crazy shipment game. This is a storytelling narrative game, and so it's more longer in the tooth sort of thing to get to that rewarding experience. And also it's visually fantastic, so it's really pushing the consoles to their limits at the end of the day. And so, you know what? Congrats on shipping. I hope it does well for Xbox. I hope they continue to support these types of things because, hey, you know, more games. I will tell you, like I said, I haven't played it yet. I probably will play it. This isn't typically a game I play. Like, I'm one of those Call of Duty people. I like first-person shooters. I end up playing Madden. I still play a lot of Age of Empires. I even still play Vampire Survivors on occasion. So, we'll see. We'll see. A lot of great questions into the hoppers this week. And so let's just dive into the questions of the week. Sydney2K says, happy Memorial Day weekend, Brad. Yes, in the United States, it is Memorial Day weekend, which will be on Monday. So things are going to be slower over the weekend unless something like leaks. He says, so a big game was launched this week. And he's not referring to Hellblade 2. He's referring to X Defiant. Have you and your crew tried it yet? I have not tried it yet. So this is a game more of, in my style, of an FPS, I believe is made by Ubisoft, and it's going a bit after the Call of Duty genre. I say a bit because it feels it's not quite Call of Duty, right? It's not Warzone yet, but it is an FPS, and it feels like it's got a little, I would describe it as, it feels like it has a little bit of Overwatch in it, potentially a little bit, like from an art perspective, I guess is the best way to describe it. And then it's an FPS. So I have not yet. I'm tripping. I can't remember what's the name of the Valve game. Not CS:GO. It doesn't look like CS:GO. What is the new Valve shooter? Valve FPS competitive game. Let's see if it pulls it up here. Valorant. Valorant is the one. Someone was probably screaming into their podcast or whatever YouTube. Valorant is the one that I was thinking of. Reminds me a little bit of a Valorant somewhere in there as well. So, Mad Thinus dropping in saying, you ordering a computer with ARM in it? Not yet. Not yet. I quite literally bought a fridge this week. So maybe if one of my YouTube videos explodes and the ad revenue would support, I won't. Maybe then I will. I already have an old Surface Pro X that I still use. I'm actually going on vacation here in a little bit, and I will probably end up taking that because it's still fine for what I need. It's not perfect, but I don't want to take my laptop studio, which is my much more workhorse, and I just need something thin and light, and that still kind of fits the bill at the end of the day. So I have not ordered anything specifically yet. Rafik says, hi Brad, since Jez Corden confirmed Steam will 100% in the next Xbox console. I don't know about that. I have not seen that confirmation or if that's a joke or whatever. How do you think the implementation will be? Do you think we'll get all games or will there be some exceptions? And is this going to move the needle when it comes to console sales? It would definitely move the needle when it comes to console sales. It just depends on how Microsoft does the integration. If it's just truly like a PC next gen, we'll find out. It's way too early to see. And you got to remember, when Microsoft doesn't own Valve, there was a really dumb rumor going around. Microsoft's about to buy Valve in cash. No. First off, you saw the hurdles it took them to get through the Activision stuff. There's no way they're going to turn around and do all that again for funsies. Although there is a parallel universe where Microsoft didn't buy Activision and they did end up buying Discord and Valve. Remember, there was rumors that Microsoft, I don't even think they're rumors, but like actually put in a bid for Discord and then got shot down because it wasn't enough. And so I'm not quite sure how things are going to go with Steam on the Xbox, because there's a lot that goes through my mind, because what happens to the Xbox integration? Like, that's the big part for me. The value for me, a lot of the Xbox ecosystem is like the friend and chat system where it's just baked in and integrated. If using a game from Steam on an Xbox isn't integrated with that, then the appeal of it, at least to somebody like me, is much less. And so we'll see. It'll be interesting if it does. Rafiq's second question says, and the second, Apple Vision Pro has completely vanished. Is it a failure because at the beginning, some analysts said it was going to be like the iPhone moment? Well, analysts get paid for opinions, and opinions don't always make sense. I don't know. It's too early to say if the Vision Pro is a failure, right? I think Apple and like many others like Meta look at this as like a long horizon bet, a moonshot. And so they shipped a piece of hardware that works and it will get better over time. If you go back and look at the original iPad announcement, everyone's like, and myself included, like, it's just a giant phone screen. Why would I ever want that? And yet here we are a decade later, and it's still doing great numbers. So maybe it just needs to bake a little bit longer. Ian says, on all things Surface, I have a question about the Surface Plus PCs. And recall, in March, I purchased a Surface Studio, I'm thinking Studio Laptop 2, which has a Microsoft integrated NPU. The Surface Studio 2 has 48 TOPS. Does it? However, I see that all the recent Microsoft AI announcements require Surface Plus PCs limited to Qualcomm on ARM with a minimum NPU of 40 TOPS. Any thoughts on the strategy by Surface team how to artificially limit AI as a Surface branding? So I will be really candid. I didn't remember that the Surface Laptop Studio 2 had an NPU with 48 TOPS. I thought that was more tied to the Intel chips that are upcoming, but I could be wrong. So I would double check to make sure it has 48 TOPS at the end of the day. And then he goes on to say, technically, even if all that is true, let's just say it does, because I can't remember and I could be wrong. But he says it doesn't have the Copilot key, and so is that the artificial limiter? You got to remember, it's just software at the end of the day, so they could limit it to only work on Tuesdays if they wanted to. So, right, they don't have to draw the blind. And remember the Windows 11 announcement? Remember when they originally announced Windows 11? It didn't support the Surface Studio 2, the big thing, and then all of a sudden they're like, you know what? Actually, we'll curve that line a little bit. So it's completely artificial. Microsoft will do whatever they want, and yeah. I would just point out that don't get locked up in trying to make logical sense out of it, because again, Microsoft's doing what's going to help them and their partners on a go forward basis, not what people have already paid for. And Mr. PKA dropping 2 questions to end the week, as he likes to do. Did you hear anything from Build that they're building a new Xbox sooner than we had thought? So I haven't watched all the Build sessions yet. So one of the things what Mr. PK I think is hinting at is like you can go watch some of their developer conference stuff, like Game Developer Conference, Build, and all that. And it's like, what are you guys doing on the graphics side, right? So what's this new super resolution? What's the latest version of super resolution? What are the requirements? So if the new super res stuff is really good, you can imagine Microsoft's not going to keep that to just like their Windows side. They're going to bring it over to Xbox. So I haven't seen all the sessions yet. Need to look into it. Oh, and his next question. So, since it's a long weekend, we thought of some good questions that should spice things up a bit. I saw that Microsoft Edge is now going to have the enterprise control to block screenshots. Although, ironically, recall, we'll take screenshots. Does this mean it will be RMS integrated like Microsoft Office, or will it just drive more people to install Chrome on the side? So this is a bit of a tangent, but Microsoft is going to do whatever it takes to keep Chrome from being integrated into your workflow, because if you can use Chrome, right, there's a pathway there out of the Microsoft ecosystem. And so I think Microsoft will make it harder to do that. So I think it would be integrated. Microsoft's going to do whatever they can to keep it in-house is where I'm at. Anyways, folks, it is a wonderful week. It's the end of May somehow. Hopefully you had a wonderful week, and make sure to keep it subscribed here, as the only BS on this podcast is me.